Hello, friend. Greg here. Did you know that I created some Bangkok walking tours? Use your phone to listen to me yap on a GPS guided tour that takes you through some of my favorite parts of the city, giving you the skinny on the sights and history that make this place such a shambolic, wonderful mess. Head to voicemap.me and search for Bangkok. On this episode, we welcome James Clark from Future Southeast Asia to talk about Thailand's transportation infrastructure.
So if you want the skinny on the good, the bad, and the frustrating on Thailand's rail, sea, and air development, you'll find a lot to love in this episode of the Bangkok Podcast.
Sawadee krap, and welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. My name is Greg Jorgensen, a Canadian who came to Thailand in 2001 because my buddy Trevor said that only my mother could ever find me handsome. So joke's on you, Trevor.
you proved him wrong for sure.
That's right. You suck eggs.
And I'm Ed Knuth, an American who came to Thailand on a one-year teaching contract 24 years ago. Fell in love with students who nod and smile when I ask if they understand something, whether or not they actually understand it. So I never left.
It's like when you say, do you have any questions or not? Yes. What? And so, no? Or yes?
Well, my Thai students tend to nod and just say, I'm good. And even though I know they're not, but, makes my job easier.
I never thought about how the teachers used to think of it. I remember when I was a student, they're like, do you have any questions? I'm like, no, I get it. And in my mind, I was saying, just whatever I need to say to get you to stop talking to me is what I will say.
Well, yeah, that's what I think is going on. But I have plausible deniability.
That's right.
All right. We want to give a big thanks to all of our patrons who support the show. Patrons get every episode a day early, behind the scenes photos of our interviews, a heads up to send questions to upcoming guests, and access to our Discord server to chat with me, Greg, and other listeners around the world. But best of all, patrons also get an unscripted, uncensored bonus episode every week where we riff on current events and Bangkok topics. On this week's bonus show, we chatted about Greg's use of AI to create sentimental blog posts for his son and whether or not that makes him a terrible parent. Maybe it does. Maybe it does.
No.
A conversation I had with a friend of mine in Cambodia who recently wrecked his knee, who called me for advice on whether he should get it fixed here or in Singapore. And my recent trip to the Nana Party Street near Chinatown last Friday night, and what the relatively light crowd says about the popularity of this seemingly perpetual up-and-coming drinking street. To learn how to become a patron and get all this good stuff, plus full access to over 700 bonus and regular back episodes, click the support button at the top of our website.
Yeah, and don't forget, if you listen on Spotify, you can now hear all the bonus shows there as well. If you're a patron, simply link your Patreon account to your Spotify account and add our new feed titled Bangkok Podcast Badass Patrons Only to hear the regular and bonus shows in the same place. Okay, on this episode, we are joined by a good friend of mine named James Clark, the founder of Future Southeast Asia, a website and newsletter focused on transport and urban development in Southeast Asia. Sound boring? Well, it ain't, because whether you're nerdy about it or not, it's something that affects us all. Indeed, it's hard to think of a single element of our lives that are not tightly tied to Asia's logistics networks, be they air, rail, or sea, and James covers them all. In Thailand, he's written about Bangkok's lack of a unified train ticket, the bridge to Koh Samui, the ongoing debate over the usefulness of a deep-sea port on the Isthmus of Kra, and much, much more. His work also looks at the rest of Southeast Asia too, be it Saigon's comically slow subway construction, the sorta high-speed train in Laos, or how sidewalks play a major role in Singapore's success. It's always good to talk to James to hear what's up with transport in Asia, so here is my chat with our buddy, James Clark. Right. Well, we are sitting down here with a very good pal of mine who right now is safe and dry in Chiang Mai. That'll make a good T-shirt, actually. Someone who I've thought about having on the show many, many times before, and my stupid brain has always just never come back to that idea. But I'm really happy you're finally here, James Clark, founder of Future Southeast Asia and Nomadic Notes. Welcome to the Bangkok Podcast. Finally.
Great to be here, Greg. Thanks for having me.
No, it's my pleasure, man. And I always enjoy hanging out when you come through Bangkok and we see movies and we have lunch and have some good times hanging out. But for whatever reason, I've always thought like I got to get him on the show, and it's just never materialized until now. So, yay me for being 10 years behind schedule. But
Yay me for being on at last. So it's great to be here.
I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here, man. And users can't see this right now, but I'm talking to a video screen of what looks like Colonel Kurtz in Apocalypse Now, because you see, folks, you might think that I'm the professional podcaster, but no, James is the professional podcaster, because right now he's sweltering under a blanket in a dark room in his hotel in Chiang Mai.
Yeah, thanks. I've done a few podcasts before, and I've learnt from professionals that even if they can't see you, you should just set up a nice little soundproof studio. So, like, the blankets create a nice audio environment. So, I'm here for the craft.
I very much appreciate the professionalism, and I might even learn a thing or two. So,
okay.
So you have this great. First of all, you have this great website and a great newsletter that I look forward to getting every time it comes out. And that is the Future Southeast Asia newsletter. And your beat, your specialty, I think, is a really unique one, because it focuses mostly on the rail infrastructure of Southeast Asia, but also of the general transportation infrastructure of Southeast Asia. Is that how you would describe it?
Yeah, so that's pretty much it. I cover transport and urban development in Southeast Asia at futuresoutheastasia.com. So it's I've leaned a lot into railways at this point, but I do also cover new airports or, development of airports, and I do construction updates of the major cities. So I'll visit Bangkok once a year and do a major construction update, just sort of like do a roll call of what's getting built. So, and new urban areas and, huge infrastructure projects. So like in Thailand, they're planning to build they had the Kra Canal at first, and then now they want to do this land bridge where they want to connect two ports via a railway across the peninsula. And then I just wrote about this week a plan to build a seawall in the upper Gulf of Thailand. So there's all these, there's so many things to write about. I've figured, this will be my forever job, basically, because there's always something to write about every week in this part of the world.
Right. And it's so cool that you're super nerdy about this very niche topic, because Richard Barrow is the big bad train nerd now, so it's hard to get out from underneath his shadow. But like you said, there's so much going on, and I'm always amazed at the depth of knowledge in your newsletter, because you're like, oh my God, like, are they really still talking about this or thinking about this? But let's take a step back now. So talk a little bit about what's happening in Thailand as a transport infrastructure nerd. What has you most excited about how Thailand is developing in that area?
Well, I've been covering a lot about the railways here, so there's a lot happening here, there's even projects which I'm guessing a lot of people don't even know that's happening at the moment. Like, everyone probably knows about the Thai-China high-speed railway, which will go up from Bangkok to Nong Khai. Mm-hmm. So it'll basically go through the northeast corridor, and then it'll go over to Vientiane. So that's a 250 kilometre an hour railway. So that's a high-speed railway. So that's going to be the first high-speed railway in Thailand. So that's like a pretty exciting development. But in addition to that, there's all these other new railways that I'm really interested in. So there's like a branch line off the Chiang Mai line that's going to Chiang Rai and Chiang Kong on the border. So this one you rarely ever read about. You might see it once a year in the English newspapers in Thailand, but other than that, it's just kind of like they're just slowly building it, and then maybe in 2027, 2028, there's going to be a train to Chiang Rai. So this is something they've been wanting for 50 years, and it's like, wow, it's going to be happening in our lifetime, hopefully. So yeah.
Yeah, the one to Chiang Mai, I very distinctly remember the first time. I used to take the train a lot back in the day, when my early days of being a young punk in Thailand, and I would say, "Oh, I want to visit the Chiang Rai. I'll just take the train." And I was shocked when they said, "You can't. The train doesn't go to Chiang Rai. It stops in Chiang Mai." And it just seemed really strange to me.
Yeah, I think it'll change things. Hopefully they'll get more tourism in that area, and there'll be a few provinces in the north that'll have a train for the first time, so that'll kind of open up new areas. There's also a east-west railway that's being built at the moment, so this will basically go from Mae Sot on the border, and it'll go across to through Isan. It'll go to Banpai, and then up to Mukdahan and Nakhon Phanom. So
Oh, okay.
yeah, so the eastern section is being built at the moment. So this is another one where it doesn't get published a lot. There's a few like infrastructure websites in Thai that sort of keep up to date about it, and they're very specific. They'll be like, "Oh, we've finished 7.26% of the track this month or something," and it's like, okay, great. But that's like, oh wow, that's a really random. It sounds random when you look on the map, but it's actually part of a grand plan to connect Myanmar to Vietnam by a railway. So it'll go to Laos after Nakhon Phanom, and then and into Vietnam to the port, Vung An port. Yeah.
Okay. What's the deal with road versus rail here? Because, I mean, China is doing their great, I think they call it the Belt and Road Initiative.
Right.
They're building, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of roads and things like this. But how does a country like Thailand see rail versus road in terms of transportation of goods and people?
I think road has been the main priority for a longer time, and they've sort of like tried to get that, get organised. But they're now catching up to rail, so there's all these projects like double tracking on the current single track lines. So it'll make train travel a bit faster because there's trains don't have to wait for other trains to pass.
Right.
But the main problem is they haven't connected with their neighbouring countries. So there's a train that in Laos that goes from China, which is on a standard gauge railway, but then it gets to Thailand and it's on the meter gauge, so you've got to change, the containers over and onto the meter gauge thing.
Yeah.
So it's a bit of a messy situation.
Yeah, talk about that for a bit, because this is something you've covered in your Facebook posts and your newsletters before, but there's two different, I think there's two different quote unquote standard gauges for rail lines. That is the width of the train tracks. But Thailand's is special, and it's not compatible with its neighbors. What's going on here?
So Thailand runs on the meter gauge, which is the same track that operates in most of Southeast Asia. So Malaysia and Vietnam also have the meter gauge, and it was the preferred gauge here 100 years ago in the colonial times. But the rest of the world has moved on to the standard gauge, which is like 1.435 meters. So China uses that. Most of Europe uses that. There's a few countries that use broad gauge, which is a bit wider than that. But for the most part, if anyone's building a new railway, it's going to be on standard gauge. So the problem with Thailand is they've embarked on this major project to double track all of their meter gauge railways, when what they should have done was just go, okay, let's just have a 20-year plan to convert the entire system to a standard gauge. And then that would be compatible with the train that's in Laos at the moment. So at the moment, Thailand is also, they're building the standard gauge on that high-speed train, but they're also double tracking the meter gauge train next to it. So there's going to be two different types of railways next to each other when they should have just built one and saved a lot of money. Like, the SRT are in a lot of debt at the moment, and they could have saved money by just not doing this, duplication process.
It sounds a lot like America with the imperial system. There's like they're holding on for dear life, and there's no way in hell they're going to give that up, despite what the rest of the world is doing.
They're going to hang on to that for too long.
Yeah, that's amazing. So let's back up a little bit, and I wanted to ask you something specifically, if you've heard any gossip, because I'm really interested in this because it happens to be in my neighborhood. But some background for those that might not be aware: the BTS, which is one of Bangkok's main train lines, the Green Line, the original Silom line, It goes across the river at Saphan Taksin over the Saphan Taksin Bridge. Now, when they built it, it stopped at Saphan Taksin Bridge and didn't cross the river. But I don't know why. There's probably all kinds of reasons, but for whatever reasons, they never built it. But the growing city and the demand for this extension finally won over, and they finally built the train across the river. But the bridge is a single track. There's only room for one track, which means there's only room for one train to go over the bridge at any one time, which causes a huge bottleneck. So you have to sometimes just stop and sit there for 30 seconds, 60 seconds, 90 seconds while you wait for the oncoming train to pass you, and then you can go. Now, for years, they've been talking about shutting down the bridge, which would be a huge headache, and widening the whole thing to add another track along it so both trains can go across at the same time. Have you heard anything about this? Because the last update I heard was like 6 years ago, and they're like, yeah, we're ready. Any day now, we're going to start.
I've also been following this story, and I feel your pain because that just drives me crazy when I'm at that station and you're there thinking, oh, this is like really annoying. I've seen that happen in a few countries around the world where they just they skimp out on costs. I think, oh, let's just do this single track. We'll save because we only have to build half a bridge, but basically it's going to cost more in the long run. So these things always come back to bite, and it's unfortunate that they didn't. Even if they had have just built one track and left a reserve for the future, that would have been a much better solution.
Right.
I think that's on a very long wish list of things that need to be done, and unfortunately, I haven't heard anything. It's sort of like I haven't, I kept wondering about the extension of the Silom line further west into the old city. It just stops there at National Stadium. You think, when are they going to go on with this extension? But it's like probably years away from happening.
That reminds me of when I was shoveling the snow as a kid, and my stepdad would say, if it's worth doing right. And I would just half-ass my way through it, and then he'd make me go out and do it again. And I never learned the lesson that it was always best to do it right the way the first time.
He should have been working for the BTS then, shouldn't he?
Yeah, no kidding. So another project I wanted to ask you about was the proposed bridge from the mainland to Koh Samui. What's going on here?
That's another one that's been talked about for years, and that would be about 17 kilometres. So that would be one of the longest bridges in Southeast Asia. Not the longest, so it's definitely doable. But that's sort of in feasibility stage, and they've had a few meetings about it. But maybe that would go on for years as well. So I wouldn't hold my breath waiting for it at this point. But you never know.
I'm not holding my breath for any of these, but that's the damn thing about it, isn't it? Is it you always see these grand plans, and for me anyway, and I know I've been here a long time, but it seems like you're like, oh, there's nothing happening, and then a year goes by and everything happens, and suddenly there's like 200 new kilometers of rail lines. So it seems to like they say, it seems to happen not at all and then all at once. Exactly,
and that's the thing. There's smaller lines that I'm talking about, which might all come together within the space of a year or two, like the Chiang Rai and the Isan line. So those would be kind of really interesting. And then, all of the urban railways in Bangkok, there's like, you've got 3 lines under construction right now. So that's kind of, Bangkok's doing a pretty good job in actually at least ticking over the grand plan of having a very extensive network, even though it still feels like there's a long way to go because it's such a big city and it's going to take a lot more lines to sort of make traveling more manageable.
Right. And it's still surprising. Like a couple of years ago, me and our friend Scott, we went out one day and we rode a bunch of the train lines because we were unfamiliar with them. And we realized that there was so much happening. We were at risk of becoming strangers in our own city. Someone would say, hey, how do I get to blah, blah, blah on the purple line? And I would be like, no idea. I've never ridden the purple line. So we went out to ride a bunch of them. And I was really shocked how long it took. Like if you wanted to go from where I live, which is down by Saphan Taksin, up to like near Gokret in the north of Bangkok, it would take like an hour and a half on the train, which is a long trip. It's
Yeah.
just easier to take the car.
Right. And that's the other thing, isn't it? It's like you've got to make the the trains as easy as possible for commuters. So all the extra friction of like not having stations that have good interchanges just adds time and inconvenience. And
Yeah.
that's a big, like, you want a station where you can just walk out and then you go downstairs and there's another train platform, or they're even better. There's a like they, the Bangkok's urban railway just started off perfectly with the BTS with that cross-platform interchange at Siam. Like
Hmm.
that's just what a great interchange should look like. You just walk across the platform and
Right.
the train going in the same direction is there. Uh, but unfortunately, the good lesson was lost after that great example. So then the next interchanges, you've got like Asok and Sukhumvit, where you've got like terrible interchange where you've got to go outside, go downstairs in all of the chaos, and then the Silom intersection where you've got to go. You're coming from underground, and you go up to the overpass, the Saladang, and it's like, oh my god, it's just like this is
Right.
meant to be one of the main interchanges. This should have been properly integrated.
Yeah, and it's funny because this is a constant frustration for people, and I am not an engineer, I am not a transportation expert at all. But you have the Asok Sukhumvit interchange where they built it and they connected them like the subway to the SkyTrain, which is quite a distance up vertical. And then, after they opened it, what I heard was that someone very important said, "Hey, why don't you put some escalators in here?" And they were like, "Oh, good idea." And then you have the interchange, the brand new interchange at Bangsu, where the huge new Grand Central Station is, and it was built like a kilometer away from the next connecting line. You have Payatai, the Payatai Airport link, which was touted as this is a massive station, and it was going to be this huge airport rail link, and where you could check in your bags, and it was a total failure because it was in the middle of nowhere and there was no easy way to get to it. You have the lack of a single card that ties all the systems together. It's just like it's really easy to say, like, just to be very, very critical on one hand. On the other hand, you say, okay, well, I don't understand all the details. But then on the third hand, you're like, really, what's there to understand? I mean, this is not,
No, that's
it
right.
doesn't seem like rocket science.
It's not rocket science, and the fact is that we've got plenty of other cities to draw experience from,
Right.
uh, to know what to do right. We all know that having a good interchange is a better user experience. It just cuts the friction between traveling, especially if you're a commuter that has to do 3 different train lines to get to work. If you've got like you have to do 2 interchanges that are really messy, it's just like it just makes your car look a little bit more enticing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but it just got off to a bad start because there's all these different companies running the railways, and they all have their own payment system. Now, a lot of your listeners are probably familiar with the Mang Moom card. So this was
Hmm.
like this plan 10 years ago. I think it's been longer than that, where they wanted to make a unified payment system which would work across all of the train systems, and that just hasn't happened.
Well,
Um,
it's like a lot of things. There's a lot of people who just enjoy the status quo as it is, who are very comfortable with how things are working now. What's the old saying? It's hard to change someone's mind when their job depends on it not being changed. You know what I mean?
that's right. Yeah. So, I mean, there's been some really great changes in the last year or so. With like they've introduced the 20 baht fare to a lot of the
Mhm.
railways. So because some of the tickets were getting quite expensive. So if you tallied up like if you're doing 6 different rail lines in one day to work, you're talking like it's more expensive than some Western European countries.
Yeah, it can get
So
very expensive, especially if you're a laborer, if you're a Thai person who's working like in a cafeteria or a restaurant or something like that. You're looking at your daily wage is what I was guessing 800,000 baht a day or whatever it is. And then you're spending 220 baht a day on transit. That's a significant chunk. It's not sustainable.
Yeah. So if they bring in and the other thing that the government has been talking about setting up an infrastructure fund, which would be used to buy back the railways from the private companies and put it all under one company, which would be a game changer. That's basically what needs to happen. So I'm pretty excited about this story because it would mean they could then go ahead with like having a unified payment system where your card remembers where you've been. So like say, for example, the London Oyster card, you could like travel around on different modes of transport, and then it knows when it'll reach a daily cap and it won't charge you any more for the rest of the day.
Mm.
So in here, it's impossible to know. You can have a card that on the BTS, but it doesn't know that you've already been on the MRT 4 times today. So it has to
Right.
It has to have a system that talks to each other.
Right.
So
Yeah.
and also if the system was unified, it means that then they could start retroactively building interchanges that actually work, where you can use the one ticket instead of paying, tapping out to go outside the station and going downstairs to another system.
And that wouldn't only be a benefit for commuters and make it easier for the average Joe or Somchai to get from A to B, but that would be a giant leap forward. In a city with so many transportation options, that would kick Thailand way ahead in terms of being a world-class city. It's known for its trains, its boats, its buses, its traffic. And if you connected all that together and made it, on comparable to somewhere like Hong Kong or Malaysia or KL or something like that, it would do wonders for I don't know, the international reputation might be a bit lofty of a term, but it would really sort of help cement Bangkok as a true world-class city, or one that's on its way,
Yeah, that's exactly it. It's like if they want to be, seen as a world-class city, you've got to start with this transport system that's unified and cheap for people who are, for workers, because it's getting too expensive as it was. So having a system where you can jump from, the railways and then onto the local bus system, and then integrate the boat systems as well.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, and it just makes it. We need to get as many cars off the road as possible because there's only car numbers are still going up, and you can't make any more roads. So this is not an equation that's going to be for reducing traffic.
No, and I drive to work every day, and I would love to not drive to work every day. I would love to get on a train and just sit back and relax. But it's just, but when I started my new job a few months ago, and man, the amount of traffic math I did trying to figure out a cheap and sensible way to get to work by not using my car, but it's just impossible. It just doesn't work out. So here I am in the car.
Yeah, it's going to take years, but it's like it's a job that needs to be done every year. Where there's there are 3 lines under construction now, and you've got to have more in the pipeline and ready to be under construction when the next lines are online. It's just get it going. It's going to be a long-term project.
Well, as we're wrapping up here, I want to also talk about something. I just read the news the other day that they've opened up the line from Bangkok to Vientiane, the train line. Is that high speed or is that just a regular?
No, it's the same line that's always been there. They've just basically extended. They've added a bit of extra track in Laos. So there used to be a train that goes from Nong Khai to Tanaleng, which is basically on the other side of the Mekong River. And now the State Railway of Thailand helped Laos build this extension that goes into Vientiane at Kam Savath Station. So basically, it's now possible to run a train from Thailand into Vientiane proper. So Thailand are now offering these overnight trains from Bangkok to Vientiane, but you still have to get off at Nong Khai and go through immigration, and they run a shuttle train over the border. But it's basically the same ticket, so it's sort of technically a train to
Oh,
Vientiane.
interesting. I'd like to do that
But
one time.
this is a not the same. Maybe in I think they keep changing the date when they're going to build the high speed train, but maybe 2028 there will be an actual real high speed railway from Bangkok to Vientiane.
Wow.
But they haven't built the bridge that's going to be on that yet, so who knows how long that will take.
And you've ridden the real high speed train in Laos, right?
That's the semi high speed train, so that one only goes at 160 k's an hour.
Oh, okay, so pretty speedy.
It's fast. It's semi high speed, but there's a high speed one in Java. So there's this Jakarta to Bandung train, which is 350 kilometers an hour.
Wow,
it's one of the fastest trains in the world. It's a Chinese built train, and it's amazing. Yeah, it's what the future looks like, really. So
really?
By comparison, the one in Thailand that's getting built is 250 kilometers, which is still pretty epic, but it's not 350 kilometers.
It's not 350. It's 100
Right.
faster.
Yeah.
100 better.
Yes.
and what's up with they're building a new terminal at Suvarnabhumi, and then there's talk of another terminal after that.
Yeah, they're basically just always adding stuff there. They've got a third runway on the way. I recently went through the new. They got a satellite terminal there, so that's like there's an underground people mover that takes you out to the thing. It's a real hike, but it's like it's like, oh wow, it's like a whole lot of. I think they're putting all the cheap flights out there, so
right.
It's not,
so you gotta walk past all the King Power shops.
Yeah, exactly. How many can you do in one day? Yeah. But yeah, they've got a mania for airport building, which I've also written about. Like Chiang Mai want to build a second airport, and they want to build another airport just outside of Phuket. So, and a few other airport expansions as well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, they could take some lessons from Changi in Singapore, because when I was down there a few months back, and God damn, that's a nice airport. And then you come to Suvarnabhumi, and it just felt so clinical and cold.
Yeah, it's sort of Bang Su Krong Tep Apiwat Central Terminal has the same vibe as Suvarnabhumi, where it's like just all grey. No furnishings, it just feels very clinical and boring, basically. So
yeah, it's a shame.
You go to Changi, and it's like, you got I think because of the carpet, it sort of dulls the sound, like me talking in my sound booth here. I know just how it's like when you're at Suvarnabhumi, it's like the announcements really bounce off the walls there, and it feels really echoey.
Yeah, when you're in Changi, it feels like you're in a gigantic living room.
Yes.
But in Suvarnabhumi, it sounds like you're in an operating theater.
Yes. I keep hearing that end of the walkway announcement, because I've been stuck there so many times.
Oh God!
Waiting for my next flight.
Well, the last thing I'll say is that Bangkok has its problems for sure, but man, you spend a lot of time in Saigon in Vietnam, and man, it seems like a shit show there in terms of their train system. I mean, it looks like they're in a competition to see who can have the most slowest development for a rail system.
That's right. I think I've been meeting up with you for probably a decade or more, and every time I come to Bangkok, I'm like, oh wow, you guys have got a metro. It's like so they started building line 1 of the Ho Chi Minh City Metro in 2012, and it was meant to be finished in 2018, and it's still under construction. Every year since 2018, they've said, oh, it's going to be next year. It's going to be next year. And now, last week, they said, okay, definitely Q4 of 2024. So they're saying by the end of December, it's going to be ready. So most of us have been there for this long of okay, we'll believe it when we see it. But I'm sort of scheduling. I'll be in Bangkok in December, and then I'll be scheduling my travels to be there for the opening of that.
quote
So,
unquote opening.
yeah.
Is it going to be like, you remember when Suvarnabhumi was open and Taksin was the prime minister and he promised that it would open by a certain date in 2006, and then like on that date they had one plane land, and
Yeah.
and they're like, aha, success,
Yeah.
but it actually didn't actually open for like another 6 months.
Usually what they do there is like the projects get blown out, that so delayed that they will then announce a new date, and then like sort of open it a few days before that. So it's sort of like 2 days early but 5 years late. So that's one way of getting around it.
Interesting. Oh man. Well, yeah, I guess it could always be worse, right? And there are places that might look at Ho Chi Minh City and say, "Wow, at least they're getting something. Like we don't have anything." So
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's all relative, but I think, in terms of transit, Bangkok has really come a long way. Like you're up there with Kuala Lumpur now with like the amount of lines you have, and
Right.
the fact that you've got so many in the pipeline, and that they're actually, either under construction or planned is pretty exciting. I'm sort of last time I was in Bangkok, I was sort of looking around Democracy Monument, and you've got like the Purple Line South extension,
hmm
which will interchange with the Orange Line West extension. So
Yeah.
just the fact that there's going to be two underground stations at Democracy Monument, just like I remember first going there, getting the Klong boat nearby, and now it's like, wow, I can get a train there now.
Yeah. God, just imagine all the new opportunities for the scam artists down there. Just going to be amazing.
Yes, it'll be everywhere.
Well, James, thanks, man. It's really good to talk to you as always, and really good to hear what you're thinking about the transportation infrastructure in Southeast Asia. Where can people find out more about you and sign up for your newsletter?
Yeah, just go to futuresoutheastasia.com, and there's a sign up box on that site where you can get my weekly newsletter. It comes out every Wednesday, and I cover all of the transport and urban development issues in Southeast Asia. So it's just a nice summary of everything that's happening. So whether it's like the subway they're planning in Bali or a new high-speed railway in Java, I'll cover it, and you can sort of get an idea of what's happening in the region.
Yeah. I highly recommend everyone who's interested in Asia to get it. It's really, really comprehensive, very interesting. And I think actually it's kind of a barometer of sort of more of like the economic health, the cultural health, the sort of undercurrents of what's happening in a lot of these Southeast Asian megacities. So it's really interesting to keep an eye on. And your newsletter is a great source of info in that regard.
Thanks, mate.
Well, thanks, man. It's great to chat, and thanks for coming on the show. And we'll get you back on again for round 2, this time much, much sooner than 10 years from now. But I think in the next 3 or 4 years, there's going to be a lot more to talk about in terms of Bangkok trains.
Thanks, Greg. I look forward to being back.
Cool, man. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
วันนี้8วันนี้70วันนี้40ค่ะตอนเล็กเนาะ
So I got to be honest, this is something that I probably would have been bored by when I first came to Thailand. But no, but seeing how things have changed since we've been here, you and I have just talked about just the MRT and BTS. It just completely changes Bangkok. Just that level of development, let alone some of the bigger ones he's talking about. I now think it's fascinating. Like this type of this type of technological development, it affects everything. Like if you put in a high speed train, it's like it's transformational. You know what I mean?
Totally. Yes, totally. And a city like Bangkok, you're right. Like when, coming from Canada, where I'm from, like there's the LRT, which is the light rail transit in downtown, but people don't ride passenger trains. Trains aren't a big part of the transportation infrastructure there. The cargo, yes, but they're on the old slow ass diesel trains, but you have a city like Bangkok. And I mean, the development of its rail network is, like I said in the interview, it's sort of a barometer of its overall economic development too. True. And it's really exciting and interesting to see how these things, grow and spread, and what kind of effects they have on the life and the ambiance of a city.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think all this stuff is really cool now. Like I wish, and travel is not difficult in Thailand, but there's so many things that I wish were easier. Like I wish there was a high-speed train up north. I wish it was easier to get down south. Like this idea of either like a bridge or something to Samui, or we've talked before about like boat transport, like down the river and out into the ocean,
Right.
like this type of thing. If you make one of these changes, it's actually not a small change.
No, it's not. And it's funny because if you get far enough away from sort of the main downtown of Bangkok, the main core of Greater Bangkok, and you're up high enough, you can actually see where the train lines go by the tall buildings. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
You can't see the train tracks, but you can see where the tall buildings are.
Where the development follows the train.
They generally follow the train tracks. So it's pretty interesting. And of course, there's big problems too. We mentioned the lack of the unified ticket here, which is like a constant pain in the ass. And the fact that, if you're like a regular Thai laborer, getting across the city on the train is not cheap. So there's still problems, but
no doubt. The other thing, the other reason I like this topic is there's something about countries in Thailand's level of development, or maybe Vietnam, where they are developing. So, I'm sure there's certain places or certain countries where, maybe take like Japan. They've got a high-speed train. They've got a crazy subway in Tokyo. I'm sure obviously there's new projects coming, but they've kind of already done all this stuff. And so maybe they're just tweaking, or there's nothing that's going to completely transform Japan. But in Southeast Asia, I saw a plan for Cambodia's new airport, and it was just insane, and it, like super modern, and but it had a cool Khmer design, and I'm just like, that'll change the country. Like it's Southeast Asia is exciting because it's developing.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And I keep thinking like his story about taking the high-speed train in Laos, the high-ish speed train. He's like, it only goes 250 kilometers an hour or whatever it was. But, a lot of parts of Laos, people are still using oxen to plow their fields, right? And then you see like a 250 kilometer maglev train go by in the background, and it's like, what the hell? So it's a really interesting aspect, and I think James's newsletter, Future Southeast Asia, is really, really interesting, and he's kind of cornered the market on this coverage of all this stuff in Southeast Asia. So definitely worth a follow, and many thanks to James for coming on the show. Always fun to chat.
For sure. Thanks, James.
Yeah. All right, let's get into some love, loathe, or live with, where one of us picks a particular aspect of living in Bangkok, which we then discuss to decide if it's something we love about living here, loathe about living here, or have come to accept as something we just have to learn to live with no matter how we feel about it. And this week, Ed, what do you got for me?
All right, I got something. It's a little bit hard to explain, but I think this is a legitimate question once I explain what I'm talking about. Okay. Basically, I want to know if you are a joiner. And what I mean by that is the plethora of apps and networks and clubs you can join. Like usually there's some perks involved, like major Cineplex. Like, do you have the app? Did you sign up? Did you give them your email? Or Foodland or Villa? Like you join the Villa network, you get 5% off. Are you a joiner? Like, do you mind just giving your email to everyone, signing up, joining the club? Sometimes there's a card you got to get. I feel like everywhere I turn in Bangkok, someone's asking me to join a network.
Interesting. This is a really interesting question because I am vehemently anti-joiner.
Okay. Okay, that's a good answer. You're a loathe, basically.
Hard loathe. And I may have mentioned this on a previous episode, but a few months ago I was out with a friend and she's like, we're gonna go to this restaurant and they have like a 10% discount. And I was like, sushi. And I was like, 10% discount on sushi. I'm in for that. She's like, yeah, nice. Just download the app and then create an account. And I'm like, I'm out. I'm already out.
That's right. Like, it's always like, no, this is exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I would pay 10% of my meal not to do that.
This is great. Well, at least we've got a clear answer. You know what? Why this is in my mind is I was at, you probably drive, or I guess you're even close enough to walk, but I was at Icon Siam and I came out to get a taxi, and I was a little bit of a hurry, and there weren't that many people waiting, and there were a bunch of taxis, but basically they now have some queue a queuing system, but they don't have just a machine where you have to get, your ticket. It's actually, they've got a big QR code. And so to get a taxi at Icon, you have to hit the QR code. That takes you to an app to download. Then you have to join some taxi club, worldwide taxi club network. So it's like some taxi queuing.
Oh my God.
Worldwide network.
Dude, getting out of Icon Siam is a nightmare.
And I'm telling the guy, like, I'm pointing to basically cabs that are waiting for me. And he's like, oh, you got to get the queue. You got to, so it's not even just get a number. It's download the app. So you're standing there like on 4G or 5G or whatever. And I'm waiting for the app to download. And then I install the app and it's like, it's asking information like my name, my address. I'm like, I just want to get a taxi.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah, man, this is just bothers me so much. And when it's 7-Eleven or those stupid goddamn stickers they try to give you, and I'm like my sticker, and sometimes they look at me like, but they're free, like
it's worth
they're free,
$3.
and I'm like, I know, I don't want your goddamn stickers. And every time I go to buy groceries, like I spend thousands and thousands of baht there a month.
Sure.
And they're like, what do they say in Thai? Misamachit. Like, do you have a membership? And I'm glad I never shop with my wife. She'd kill me because I always say no, like stupid membership program. Just let me go home.
You're like, I realize I've been coming here 10 years and I could save money, but no, I'm not I'm not joining.
So I will go out of my way to not have to mess with any of that stupid crap. Yeah.
Interesting. Well, it's funny because I was going to say that I'm a loath too, but you're a harder loath. So I am a member of a few things here and there. It's just, there should be a limit. I shouldn't have to. It's like everywhere I go and everything I want to do, it's like you got to join the network and give up your email. So I'm now a loath.
Yeah, and now the person pulling out their phone and swiping through to try and find the app for whatever stupid store they're in, so they can open the app and then sign in and then scan a QR code. That's the new version of the old lady with the check at the cashing machine. Back in the day where they're 140 cents only.
For sure. No, there's a Starbucks. There's a Starbucks near my university, and I'm always stuck in line there, and there'll be some Korean people in front of me trying to use like Samsung Pay, and they're trying to get it set up, and I'm just like, just use bots, just be like a human being. But no, everything's got to be electronic.
Yeah,
and
it's
rough.
In their defense, some Starbucks don't even take cash anymore. So
true that.
Sort of between a rock and a hard place there, but.
All right. Well, I guess we're a double load on that.
That was a good rant. Yeah. I hate those things. So I will pay money not to join them. How's that?
You're going to join a club that makes sure you don't have to join any other clubs.
That's right. It's like having a master password for a password app on your computer. Like, I don't have to remember any passwords except this one password, which is the master of all passwords. One password to rule them all.
That's funny. All right, a final thanks to our patrons who support the show. Patrons get a ton of cool perks and the warm, fuzzy feeling knowing that they're helping in our never-ending quest for cool content. Find out more by clicking support on our website. And connect with us online. We're Bangkok Podcast on social media, bangkokpodcast.com on the web, or simply bangkokpodcast@gmail.com. We love hearing from our listeners and always reply to our messages.
Yeah, you can also listen to each episode on YouTube if you want. Send a voicemail through our website that we'll feature on the show. Hit me up on Threads at BKK Greg. Thank you for listening, folks, and we will see you back here next week.
For sure.
Ahem, la-di-da.
Anyway, if you watch any of the Menendez brothers stuff, you will have no doubt that you actually are a good father. So if you ever feel like, God, I'm not really a good dad, just watch the Menendez brothers show, and you'll be like, okay. I'm a saint.
I'm doing really good. Man, I don't know. I just finished Breaking Bad. Now I got to watch El Camino, and then I got to watch Better Call Saul. Then I got to catch up on Rings of Power. Then I got to catch up on the Game of Thrones prequel. I already forgot what it's called.
House of the Dragon.
House of the Dragon. Yeah, it's so much to watch.